You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. All right, my guest today is Shonda Moralis. Shonda is a licensed clinical social worker, and she is on a mission to help women play big without burning out. She's also a life balance coach, a self-proclaimed therapreneur, love that, an author, and podcast host. Shonda serves on the board of Shanti Project, an education nonprofit providing evidence-based mindfulness services to children and adults. She lives in Pennsylvania with her husband and 2 kids, loves the outdoors, endeavors to practice what she preaches here today, and is fascinated by what makes people tick. She is the author of Breathe, Mama Breathe, and the upcoming book, Don't Forget to Breathe, a 5-minute mindfulness for busy women. Beat stress and find calm anytime, anywhere. All right, so today we get to know Shonda a little bit more and about her mission and about her personal motherhood journey and how it's connected to the work she does today. We talk about balance. Is it possible? Is it not? We talk about mindfulness at length, and Shonda gives us really tangible, easy, quick examples of how to add more mindfulness to our daily lives. We talk about the triangle of awareness, having an attitude of amusement, and the importance of course correcting throughout the day. As always, tune after for my final thoughts, and here's Shonda. Hey, Shonda. So nice to meet you. Thank you for being here with me today.
Hi, Christy. It's great to be with you.
I want to start by asking often the therapist guests that I have, what prompted you initially to get into that line of work?
Yeah, good question. So it wasn't a straight shot, as probably you get a lot of answers about that. Maybe you don't. I mean, in retrospect, of course, it makes sense. I was the quiet listener, helper, friend, so it does make sense, but I was an economics major, thinking I was going to kind of go into business. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated from undergrad. So I moved back home and I decided I was going to find a job that just interested me, even though I wasn't going to make much money. It was kind of just like, let's figure this thing out. So a few years, did some waiting tables, took some classes, and I came across a women's center, an abortion and reproductive and health center for women. And I started as a counselor there. And so pretty soon I started to feel like, wow, this is just such a great match for me. Women's issues, women's empowerment, and this taste of counseling. And so then I went back to graduate school for therapy and worked often for a number of years with women's issues, and then came back around to other types of therapy in private practice. So it makes sense, but it wasn't always the plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what kind of counseling were you doing before you got your degree?
So at the Women's Center, it was about choice. So it was about educating women about do they want to have an abortion or health birth control options, what their options were they ready, it was part of the law in Pennsylvania where I live, and it still is mandated counseling.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, cool. And I love part of your bio says that you identify as a therapreneur. I
Yes.
love that. So I mean, I don't mean to super fast forward, but go from private practice, full-time therapy to now, you've got a whole other business with coaching and you're author, your podcast host. Like, what was the transition like there and why?
Yeah. Well, thinking that with private practice, just straight private practice one on one, it started to feel a little bit stale, I have to say. And I wasn't loving it as much. And I knew I still loved it, but I felt like I needed to inject some energy into my work. So I found mindfulness, which we'll talk more about, I'm sure,
Mhm.
and learned more, started teaching mindfulness based stress reduction and used that in therapy. So that was a piece. And then with the publication of my first book, Breathe Mama Breathe, in 2017, is when other possibilities started opening up for me and speaking and writing in other ways. And since then, it's just really energized me because that other type of work, the entrepreneurial work, feeds my energy around working with clients and coaching and therapy. And it kind of just vice versa. So it informs each side sort of informs the other. And I've done in the past few years kind of a bunch of experimentation with different endeavors. I now have a podcast myself, Therapeutic Perspective Podcast, where therapists can earn continuing education credits for listening because we need so many per cycle.
Wow,
And we cover some really interesting topics. So yeah,
that's
that's one
awesome.
piece of, yeah, it's very
Yeah,
cool. It's one piece of what I do.
cool. Okay. A few things I want to go back to there. Your first book, Breathe Mama Breathe. You know, I've often said, you know, there's a book in here in me
Yeah,
coming.
right.
Like, how did that go for you? So like, I know I want to write a book, or just like what happened and what ultimately had you put pen to paper, so to speak?
Yeah, yeah. Always did like writing, but I'm not a fiction writer, at least not yet. And I never really felt I was. And I didn't feel like I had enough wisdom or knowledge to write about anything that was nonfiction.
Mhm.
So it wasn't intentional, actually. I was writing blog posts for women and moms that I was working with. And at the time, I have two kids. They are now 20 and 10. And at the time, my son was an infant. And I was writing about my experiences and helping other moms with little ones. And so I started to compile these blog posts and thought, I could make a workbook out of this or some kind of practical application for the women I'm working with. And then I thought, well, hey, maybe this could be a book. And so I started looking into publishing. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to try. I'm going to try to find an agent. I'm going to try to find a publisher. We'll see how it goes. If that doesn't work out, I'll self publish. I'll have this piece of work. And it did work out. And it's been an amazing ride.
One step at a time, right?
Yes, yes.
All right. And so, therapy, this is something I ask a lot. And, I have a pretty good understanding, but I'm always curious to hear it from your point of view. Therapy versus coaching. How do they differ for you? And what can someone expect within each space?
Yes, yes. For me, it's about therapy is often a lot of past work. Kind of how did we get to this place? And how do we untangle a lot of these patterns, which can also be in coaching as well. But mostly it's kind of past work and also getting people up to baseline. So there are people that are really suffering more and then getting them to baseline. And to me, coaching is often about somebody who is functioning pretty well. They just feel like there's something missing from my life. I want more. I need direction. I need some guidance. And of course, there's mindset work in that as well. But it's more about kind of future and moving forward. And that's how
Okay.
I see it. Yep.
Okay. And I'm curious, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but as someone who has the expertise now in both, like the education in both, I just imagine like my brain always wants to compartmentalize. So if you're working with someone as a coach and they bring something up, do you actively have to say to yourself, like, this is not therapy, I have to do this differently? And how do you how do you manage that?
How do you
Because
navigate that? Yeah.
because like, you know, both, you know,
Right.
all of it, you know,
Right.
and I
Yes.
don't know, I imagine that being difficult.
Well, right. So you're right. You want to be intentional about it. Of course, our any kind of work, any kind of career we have or experience we have informs who we are and how we approach a situation, our perspective. I probably talk in acronyms that people don't know what I'm talking about if you're not in the
Mhm.
mental health field, all of those kinds of things. So it's impossible to completely tease it out. Yet, if you start to feel like, hey, this feels like an intervention that, a therapeutic intervention is called for here, sure, maybe a one off kind of thing we might address. But if it's something that sort of is like, hey, this is something that maybe you could go for therapy, to address this, and I see this, and explain that, and just be explicit with the person I'm working with. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, yeah. And, sometimes you find yourself getting pulled in that direction. You just have to kind of come back. But you're right. Because there's a lot of nuance.
Yeah.
We have to be cautious about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And so you mentioned you have a now 10 and 20-year-old. Is that it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. 10 years apart. What was that like?
Yeah. Or what is it like?
What is
It's
it
still
like?
going
Yeah.
on.
I know. I think what was, because I think of like, you know, the little one being baby and the other one being 10. Like, I don't know. That just, what was it
Yeah.
like before I put
Yeah.
words in your
Yeah.
mouth?
Well, people always ask, what is the ideal, or not always ask, but some people ask what is ideal. And I think it's, there are pros and cons to no matter how you space kids, if you're lucky enough to be able to consciously or intentionally do so. So for me, it's been really fun. Now that my daughter is heading into her senior year of college, I'm really happy I have my little guy still at home.
Mhm.
Kind of keeps me young. And, but yeah, I think it's really helped me to not sweat the small stuff, because I've seen with my daughter, I started out quite perfectionistic and had to really let that go. I feel like, sometimes it's sanity or perfection when you're parenting. And it's like, I'm glad I was able to choose sanity. So letting go a lot of the perfectionism and type A behavior. And I have a lot of compassion for especially first time new moms who we just want to get it right. I mean, and because it matters so much, it's like one of the probably the most important thing we do. And of course, we're going to take ourselves so seriously and take it so seriously. But seeing that my daughter is fine, even though I fed her some hot dogs and put her in front of the TV sometimes, she's okay and she's
Right.
turning out just fine. So that is really helpful. And my son is lucky for that. That he's kind of like the second go round much
Yeah.
later. Yeah.
Yeah. Where does your personal motherhood experience, I don't know if I want to say overlap or intertwine with your work? Like, where are you having to coach yourself or work yourself through in a therapeutic way, something that
Uh,
you're going through in motherhood?
Yeah. Well, I think, mom guilt comes out of the womb, or if we're, as soon as we hold that baby, mom guilt shows up. So that is something, I mean, certainly I've gotten a lot better with these things, but of course it still shows up. And, right now I am on a podcast tour to launch my new book, and I've been a lot busier, my
Mhm.
schedule is a lot more full these past few weeks than normal. And I knew it was coming. And so, it's not a surprise. And it was intentional, but it's still, I might look at my son, I'm so sorry. Like, we had a half an hour together today that was like really one-to-one time, and I'm sorry. And so it's just knowing that I am being intentional about it. I can know that it's temporary. And that's, part of what I teach and work on is life balance for myself and all of us, because there are seasons, there are times there that can we just kind of know or course correct if we feel like we've gotten off balance.
Mhm.
So yeah, I forget what the question was that I started answering.
How and if you have to coach yourself
Oh
through
yes, yeah. So
aspects of
that,
motherhood and
yeah, sure, sure.
yeah.
Or, you forget something. And I always say, like, we're so good at, being so hard on ourselves that we can juggle 1,000 balls, and then we drop one and we're like, how could you forget the dentist appointment?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, because you have 999 other balls in the air still. And, we forget that. So
Yeah.
of course, that happens too.
Yeah.
Um,
We'll we'll
yeah.
we'll give we'll give grace to everyone else except for
Yes.
ourselves usually,
Yes. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so in that response, you said balance a few times. I'm finding the more I interview and the more I immerse myself, just whether it be on social media or whatnot, in maternal mental health and motherhood content, there are sort of two camps forming. One that believe in balance, the other that say balance is not possible.
Right.
Where do you sit with it? I mean, obviously you're using the term, so we have some understanding, but from that point of view,
Yeah.
what are your feelings on it?
Yeah. Well, I think balance isn't, not only is it possible, but it's optimal. And I think it depends on our definition of balance, because if we are defining it as some, perfect, situation that we are going to land on and then it never needs to change, then that's certainly not going to work, of course. Or if we think we're balance means that we're giving equal attention to all parts of our lives at all time, no, that's not working either. So it's,
Mhm.
to me, it's this ongoing gentle recalibration that changes through our seasons of life, through our and moment to moment. And so it's just sort of being intentional about noticing when the balance is off, and then course correcting as best we can. So what looks like balance when I have little ones at home is going to look very different when my kids are in elementary school or off to college, for sure. So um, we have to recalibrate, and it is about offering ourselves that grace along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So put yourself either in the home of a client or take yourself back to your own experience, or, really what I'm asking is put yourself in my home. What would, with my 2 and 4-year-olds,
Yes.
what's an example of how you've seen the idea of balance play out? Like, how could that look?
Okay, with little ones,
Yeah.
and to kind of course correct and recalibrate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things where mom, often what's very common is that we put ourselves absolutely last, right, on the priority list, and it's kind of like after I have done XYZ all the way around the alphabet a few different times, then if I still have time, I'll do this for myself.
Mm,
And so it's about offering ourselves that, carving out that time, not just
mm,
offering, but making that time and making it an absolute priority that I need to stop what I'm doing and everything, the dishes will be there, this will happen, and I need to take 5 minutes for myself. And that's, part of what I really preach is about these 5 minute mindful breaks. And if you don't have 5 minutes, then 20 seconds, 1 minute. But there are ways that we can bring ourselves back into the moment, calm our nervous systems down just a little bit in the midst of our full days.
mhm,
And so it's moment to moment awareness and calming. And it's also then, can we pause and then be intentional about where we want to go? We'll talk about what a mindful break is, but one of the tools that I talk about is called life as pie. And this is, drawing two
mhm,
circles on a piece of paper. And the first one is your current pie, how all of the pieces of your life are divided up. So whether it's, friends or community or work, chores, exercise, and then your ideal pie. And without getting in our heads and saying, well, how in the world do I get to my ideal pie? Forget that. No, just do it, just as an exercise to see what would that look like. And then what is one small action step I can take toward my ideal pie? So maybe it's just like, I'm going to uh, find a neighbor that has little ones, and I can get away for 45 minutes and go for a walk, and she's going to watch the kids and they'll play together, and we'll
mhm.
swap that out, whatever it is. But it's something that's just going to move you in that direction of where you want things to go and how you want things to look.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say you're definitely touching on a lot of what you're offering in your book. So
Mhm.
tell us about the book you have coming out, what's it called, and kind of the basic premise of it.
Right. So the second book is Don't Forget to Breathe, 5 minute mindfulness for busy women. And it's somewhat of a continuation of Breathe Mama Breathe, which does address moms with little ones, but also through elementary and older as well. So this is more for any woman, and moms as well, but you don't need to be a mom and working or not working. And there are three types of, well, maybe we can talk about what a mindful break is, because that kind of is a big piece of what the books are about.
Yeah.
And a mindful break. So first of all, mindfulness, just to
Okay.
kind
Yeah.
of
Let's go all the way
lay that
back.
foundation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Backpedal a little. Mindfulness is paying attention to what's happening in the moment, with an attitude of kindness, because that's the part that often gets missed. We know it's being aware of the moment, but as best we can, we are non-judgmental, we're curious, we're open, we're kind to ourselves. So the opposite of being mindful is when we're running on automatic pilot. So we know what that feels like. In when we're on autopilot, we're either in our minds, we're worrying, we're what ifing, we're running through that to-do list in the future, or we're in the past, we're rehashing a conversation or kind of remembering something from the past. So mindfulness brings us back into the present moment. And that is so powerful because that gives us information. Then we can choose how we respond to a situation rather than just reacting. And because that affects our behavior and our actions. So mindful breaks are these opportunities and reminders in the middle of our full day where we can just pause and remember to pull ourselves out of autopilot and back into the present moment. So then we have a choice. We can take a few breaths and calm our nervous system. We can say, hey, I'm scrolling through Instagram right now for the past 40 minutes and woof, I didn't recognize I was doing that. I got lost. So come on back. What do I really want to be doing with my time right now? And so forth. And so, so each book has dozens of different mindful breaks that they're composed of. And Don't Forget to Breathe has three types. Because I think that lends itself to the balance piece. There are breathe breaks, which are about calm and awareness. There are becoming breaks, and that's if we need a shot of assertiveness or confidence. And then there are balance breaks, which are pretty much what they sound like bringing us back into balance. And so, there are some moments we need to calm ourselves really fast. And there are some moments we are like, life feels kind of boring right now. I need a little injection of energy. And that's, for a becoming break. And then sometimes it's like, hey, the balance is off. How do we do this? And so, depending on the moment or the phase of our life, we pull out a different mindful break and use it so it can help bring us what I say is an upward spiral of growth. So we keep growing, we keep recalibrating the balance, and that it can be really fun and playful. It doesn't have to be serious, and just one more thing on our to-do list.
Okay, all right. So do you, within the book, or can you share some advice with us now on how do we make sure we're doing these things? Like, it's great to have the information about what they are and what to do, which I'll come back to, but how do we make sure we're actually getting them done? We're taking the breaks and reminding ourselves to take the breaks, because we're talking about how busy we all are. How?
Yeah. So I say choose one. So you can do it one of two ways. One is to pick up the book and just pick one break that you're going to start with, and you do that every day for the week. And for 2 weeks, every day, this is what I do. Every time I'm drinking my cup of coffee in the morning, I'm going to sit and have a coffee mindful break. I'm going to really pay attention rather than multitasking and not even recognizing I'm having my coffee. So that becomes more of a habit. It doesn't require much thought, much effort. It's like I'm brushing my teeth, yes, we forget occasionally maybe, but for the most part, we don't forget to brush our teeth. So it's one of those things. It becomes a habit. And then you stack on another mindful break. And so maybe this is, as I'm transitioning, if I'm working, it's when I am turning on my laptop in the morning or whatever that is. Like that instead of doing something else, I'm just going to sit and pause, and that becomes a habit as well. So and so forth.
Okay.
And we didn't talk about meditation yet, but I believe the most powerful kind of 1-2 punch is if we're meditating at least 5 minutes a day, or to start 1 minute, 5 minutes, doesn't matter, but that's a daily habit. Ideally, first thing in the morning, kind of sets the tone for our day, reminds us to pull out of autopilot. Then sprinkle our day with mindful breaks. So that's the end eventual goal. And again, when we're sitting down and getting still for 1 minute, 5 minutes in the morning, that's when we can ask ourselves, what's needed today? What kind of mindful break do I need?
Okay. All right. Can you give an example of perhaps your preference for breathe, becoming in balance, what are your preferred avenues, or like for each type of break, what do you like to do for each one?
Mm. Boy, well, that really shifts and changes depending on, again, what's needed. So some favorite ones of people in general that I hear and that I think are super useful.
Mhm.
A calming or a breathe break would be the 4-7-8 breath. And this is when we really need to calm down in a moment. We're feeling kind of overwhelmed, panicky, and it also is good for insomnia. And it's as simple as inhaling through our nose to the count of 4, holding our breath to the count of 7, and then slowly breathing out through our mouths to the count of 8. So it's
Okay.
4-7-8. And it, especially for those of us who have worry, kind of anxious minds, more in that regard, it can really give us something to focus on. And at the
Mhm.
same time, it's calming our nervous system down because we tend to live in this low level of fight or flight a lot of the time. And so it sends a signal to our brain there's no danger, fight or flight isn't necessary, and it calms our nervous system down.
Okay.
It's a quick hit. And so, and that's something you can do anywhere, anytime. I've used it if I'm going to a speaking engagement, I'm feeling nervous in the car on the way there. Or, if you have a 2 and 4-year-old and there are some tantrums going on, like, oof, yeah.
Never.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow, that's special.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. And for the others, becoming in balance.
Okay. So, the one I like for becoming is called the green eyed monster. And this
Okay.
is about envy, jealousy. And, I hear this a lot with women as far as comparing themselves,
Hmm.
social media, or just even people around us. And uh, I talk about a story with a couple of years ago when I still had my office before COVID, and I would put my son on the bus, and I was like schlepping it out to my car. I was rushing to work and to see my first patient of the day, and I had my briefcase and my backpack and my lunch, and I pull out of my driveway and I look over and I see my neighbor, who's also my good friend, and I wave to her, and she's like strolling with her dog and her cup of coffee in the sunshine, and I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
that looks so good. I'm so jealous.
Hmm.
And I had to stop myself and say, whoa, what's up? Because number one, I know she's not laying around doing nothing all day.
Hmm.
Number two, I really like my work and what I'm doing. And it wasn't that I was jealous of her life. I was jealous. I had to figure that out. I was like, what's up here? So, I thought, okay, what's underneath here is that I'm just really craving that space to walk my dog for 10 minutes or feel like I have the time to do this.
Yeah.
And so, okay, recognizing, noticing, paying attention, and then what do I do about that? Because action, kind of just really is reinforces positive reinforcement. Um, requires action, and the more we do, the more that kind of, it's the chicken and the egg in a
Hmm.
positive way. So I went to work and I opened my calendar at lunchtime and kind of looked ahead for a few weeks because things were scheduled out so much, and kind of really set aside time in my calendar where I could have a little bit more space.
Hmm.
So it's noticing what it is we're envious of. If I'm seeing something and I'm thinking, oh wow, they have this or they have that. If it's materialistic, it's like, is it really that I want, or is it like financial security, or what is underneath that envy and that? And so it's noticing, because what can happen if we don't is we can get stuck in guilt or shame or feel like I'm not good enough, or I don't have, I'm not feeling good, and we're like half aware of it but not really. And then then I bark at my husband, or you know what I mean. It just trickles out all over the place.
Yeah.
So the more awareness we have, yeah, we can do something about it.
Okay. Right.
So that's an example of a becoming break.
Uh-huh.
And balance can be something as simple as, well, I mentioned the life is pie. That's an example of balance break. So it's
Okay.
like, how do we bring things back more into balance? Even just getting clear with values, which, I'm guessing you've talked about on this podcast before, but getting clear with our values, and then filtering our actions through our values. So is this a priority, and what really needs to be let go of and delegated, that kind of
Okay.
thing. Yeah.
Okay. And thank you for that.
Sure.
What are you seeing out there, either in your own experience or with clients, just your observations? Like, how are particularly women and moms, like, how are we getting to this point where we need a book to do this? Because I agree with you. I don't mean to knock it. We need it. We
Yeah.
need it. It's just, you don't hear men talking about this stuff a lot.
Oh,
Like,
right.
why do we need it?
Well, I think what I understood your question to be initially was why now, which I mean, of course, with COVID and everything
Mm,
else, like,
mm-hmm.
things have just been even more intense for us women. Um, what I hear from moms who have, her grandmothers, they're like, "Oh, I wish I had this when I was a mom. I wish I were
Yeah.
raising my kids with this. I didn't know this." So I think it's an age old issue. It's not something new by
Mm,
by any stretch. Although I would say with social media and everything else, we are able to compare ourselves much more than we ever could before.
mm-hmm.
Um, but absolutely, men. Well, that's a question I get occasionally. I'll be like, "Hey, mindfulness for women. Why not for men?" Well, because we have different expectations and standards that are placed upon us. I think is as much as this conversation is out there now, and which is important and great, that we need better systems, especially in the US and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Men, there still aren't expectations. It's like, oh, look at dad, look at look at you, you're such a great dad. You like, all of the so
Yeah, I can't.
what
It's
which
brutal.
is just
Yeah.
what is expected of us and what we expect of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's still a thing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know you're gonna know what to say. It's just like, I just keep seeing burnout, right? Like in my head, like combining what you just said about the last few years, combined with just generations of women
Mm.
over and over. Burnout, I feel like, is just it's like sweeping the nation.
Yes.
But not just for women. I think men are
Right.
feeling it too. They just don't have the avenue to express it. They don't have the words to express it. Maybe they don't feel like they can express it. I don't know. Any thoughts or advice on how maybe even within a partnership you could start to have that conversation with your partner, and whether it be about your own experience with burnout, or I mean, I don't know. I just can't imagine many women sitting down and being like, honey, are you burnt out? And him being like, yeah, I am, honey. Like, it's just,
I
I don't
think by
know.
that point it's pretty clear what's going on.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
have been,
right, right. Yeah.
lots of hmm, I don't know. I want to say raised voices, but kind of like heated discussions
Mm-hmm,
probably.
mm-hmm,
So it's probably pretty clear, but to your point, we don't always recognize it. So
mm,
that's where I feel like mindfulness is so important too, because the more we are tuned in, and a piece of mindfulness is knowing our thoughts, our body sensations, and our emotions. And that's actually called the triangle of awareness. And that's we do a triangle tune in is an example of a mindful break of just kind of bringing ourselves like, what's up in my thoughts right now? What am I thinking about? What emotions are here? And then what do I feel in my body? And often it's easiest to access our body sensations, not for
mm-hmm.
everyone, but if I know if my shoulders are up to my ears, or my back is
Yeah.
tight or whatever that is, that's a clue something's up. So, but we don't often pay attention until it's like, woof, it really hits us. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we are again pausing every day and just noticing, we're going to get so much more information about what's going on inside of us. And then
Mm-hmm.
the hope is that we head it off at the pass. We don't let it get to the point of burnout, and we're putting some of these tools in place to be proactive so that we also don't, because to me, balance is kind of the opposite of burnout. So we're never going to get it perfect and right all the time, but the hope is that we don't get close to burnout. And
Yeah.
so, practical conversations, I think it's coming back to as a therapist, those I statements, I'm really struggling, or I'm seeing this with you and I'm concerned about you. And what can we do here? And sometimes you got to step really far back and kind of, can't see the forest through the trees, it's until
Mm-hmm.
you kind of really step back and get a different, like, how do we need to kind of shake things up a little bit, which can be hard when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But it's almost like I come back to those, like, what is one action step each of us can take?
Mm-hmm.
What is one simple thing we can do to change things up a little bit here? And when you stack those up over time, a year from now, you're going to be in a different place,
Yeah.
but don't overwhelm yourself all at once.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that, because I feel like That's something I often fall into of, it's almost like feeling so past the point of, oh, what's this one walk gonna do? What's this
Right.
one moment of mindfulness? What's gonna do? What's this one,
Yeah.
water bottle of water gonna do? And it's like, no, you got to stack them all together.
Well, you do, but you know what? One thing matters a lot. And that's what I would invite listeners that if you want to start super small, I would say in your day, stop and just put your hands to your chest, hands to heart, and then take 3 deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And it is amazing because some of us don't ever stop. And it feels extremely painful, extremely radical, extremely hard to do. But that is the practice. And so that matters because you
Yeah.
are going to calm your nervous system down. Or trying to be mindful, not just like, oh, I'm begrudgingly drinking my bottle of water here because I'm supposed to. Well, like, can I be aware that this is, nurturing myself?
Yeah.
And one other thing I think is really important to mention as we're talking about moms, especially, is permission.
Mm.
Permission to give ourselves, to be kind to ourselves and to take this time for ourselves um, and test it out. I always say test it out and experiment, because I think what you'll see is that you will come back after a walk and, feel different, treat your kids differently.
Yeah.
It matters. It
It
matters.
does. It does. You're right. And I, yeah, yeah, it does. I just find, I've talked about this a little bit on the show, and I'm not as deep in it as I was a few months ago when I was talking about it regularly, but
Mm.
I sometimes get to the point where I'm like, can it just be easier to get through the day? Like, can it just be easier to want to do these things? Like, I start to resent
Mm.
having to do all of the coping mechanisms that I have.
Mm.
I talk on the show a lot about whether it's a therapist or just another mom sharing what her, quote unquote, like toolbox is, right? Like
Mm.
all
Mhm.
of the things in her toolbox that help her do the day, right? Or do the week, do the month, whatever. And it's like, can I do a day without a toolbox around my waist? You know what I mean? Like, I get
Yes.
frustrated with that. And the thing is the second I find myself frustrated with that is when I have to say, it's just do one thing at a time, but
Well, and
it's
noticing, I would
daunting.
say, can you notice that I'm frustrated? Can you notice that I have these expectations, that I'm tired? And just, again, first offering ourselves a little bit of compassion, because what we tend to do is be like,
What's that? No,
we're
I'm
judging,
kidding.
judging the situation, and then judging ourselves for judging the situation. So yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of resistance that shows up sometimes for you, which is understandable. And, that it's like, can I allow this is how it is in this moment? It's temporary.
Yeah.
Doesn't always feel temporary, and it can feel super intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a conversation this morning with Sarah Wallace, and she's an Enneagram expert. And
Mm.
I'm new to it, but I'm a type 3, and some of the things she was reading about type 3 to me and asking if I relate was getting to the point of being so stressed and burnt out that my ultimate stress response is to numb out
Yeah.
and sort of shut down and dissociate. And that's what happens when I get like, screw the walk, screw the water, screw the meditation. It's
Right.
like I
Right.
just want to be like in bed under the covers, not doing anything. And then that's where the depression kicks in. And then the
Mm.
anxiety follows because I haven't done anything. And we're much better off than I'm making it sound right now. I've come a long way in the
Yeah.
last couple of years. But if I let it, that cycle is
Yep.
so easy to fall into.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and that's that pattern, right? So we all have these patterns that our minds go on, this train of thought. That's this one and this one. Like, this is so hard. It shouldn't be so hard. I don't want it to be so hard. Boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom. But rather than that, that's where mindfulness comes in, as it interrupts. We notice, there's thinking. There's thinking. Now, again, it's not so simple and it's not so easy, but sometimes we can kind of redirect and say, it's a, you know, all right. So I'm having these thoughts. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to get lost in them.
Yeah.
They don't need to drive my behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So it's super easy for me to imagine these mindful breaks and how they would be helpful and apply to someone like me, home with their toddlers all the time. Like, where else would you want to see this type of practice implemented?
Everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Honestly, I mean, we can do this at work. It's about being awake for our lives and being, you know, being in the driver's seat as best we can
Mm-hmm.
of our lives, rather than getting pulled along, putting out fires, finding ourselves years down the road, like, how did I get here? You know, it's, and at the same time, I don't want it to be so tiring. So it, you know, what I definitely don't want it to be is daunting, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so do whatever feels manageable for
Mm-hmm.
real. And pick one thing, because it is easy to say, oh my God, thousands of tools that I could choose from. Forget it, going
Mm-hmm.
under the covers.
Yeah.
And what feels good? Maybe start there if you're in that place of what feels playful, you know, what feels fun, and do that,
Yeah.
because we could all probably use a little more levity and amusement and play,
Yeah.
other than, you know, Legos, Barbies, whatever that is.
Yeah. 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 Oh yeah. Right now it's Blippi and trucks and
Uh-huh.
dinosaurs.
Uh-huh.
Um all right. Well, and you know, I my lens is my lens, right? My lens is you know, mom of toddlers, and I sort of work from home and this and that. But I come from a corporate background, and you know, I can just imagine sitting in a meeting back then and someone looking at me and going like, let's have a mindful break, and being like, what in the world is going on here? And now I could totally see that. Like, how do you think we start to bridge that gap of
Mm,
there's those of us over here in self-development land, some would call it woo woo, like
yep.
we all live over here and we love it and we see the value. How do we bridge the gap to the systems, the big corporations, the people that really have a lot of influence over how our daily life goes?
Mm,
What do we
yeah.
do about that? How do we
Yeah,
do
well, I think
something about
mindfulness has made its way into the mainstream a lot more. There
that?
are
Okay.
still people who will call it woo woo for sure, but when you understand it is, there's so much research that mindfulness benefits our bodies, our brains. I mean, all the way down to the cellular level. We know that telomeres are these chromosomes, the end of our chromosomes that are almost like the end of a shoelace has that like plastic coating on it. And as we age and get older, they tend to break down and we age and we get sick and we die. But the longer we can keep the telomeres intact, the longer we age well.
Okay.
And so meditation and mindfulness literally allows the telomeres to stay intact longer. Research so I mean, we're talking brain science. Like, there is so much research about innovation, creativity. I mean, if we can talk about those pieces in corporate, then my gosh, why wouldn't you use some of this? So
Yeah.
it's also it applies a lot to leadership,
Mm-hmm.
communication. I mean, if, you know, how are you more mindful? I mean, whether you want to call it emotional intelligence or
Mm-hmm.
mindful communication, we have all had interactions with people who definitely are not mindful, and
Right.
then those who are. And we all want to be led by leaders that are more mindful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
balance of, you know, compassion and confidence and straight talk and, you know, all of the good stuff. It can help with all of that. So I think that's a piece. And, you know, practically trainings, you know, which is you see a lot in the corporate right now, is like trainings on mindfulness. Then it's like, how do we really apply it and keep it going? That can be a
Right.
challenge. But, you know, if it's an innovative company, they can start meetings, and they do, with a mindful moment or two, like literally, because what you'll realize is like, okay, I was spinning around about this last email that I was answering, or a meeting I just had, or a tough conversation, and I'm barely here in this meeting,
Mm-hmm.
but it kind of brings everybody, oh, we are here together now. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's focus. It keeps us more focused.
Yeah. We need like chief mindfulness officers.
So there are those things. There are.
Stop it. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Ah, That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so removed
Google
from like
has,
that world, but yeah,
yes.
that's very good to know. I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that came to mind as you were talking is how could we start to do this sort of thing with our kids? Like how do
Mm-hmm.
we really start to send the message that like these are good things to do. Here's how you can be a part of it. Any thoughts or advice on that?
Yeah, I talk about that in Breathe Mama Breathe. So there are definitely practices we can teach to our kids. We can be explicit about it and say, hey, let's think, what do you notice with your senses right now? What do you see? What do you hear when
Mm-hmm.
their kids are a little bit older? People will ask me how old a child needs to be before they start practicing mindfulness. And I share the story of when my son was a baby. He was 6, 9 months old, and I was having like a mommy meltdown moment. And I was like trying to breathe and I was hugging, holding him and hugging him, taking my deep breaths to calm myself. And he started coordinating his breaths with me.
Oh my
So
god,
I
so
didn't tell him,
sweet.
now you inhale, now you exhale, but so they pick up on this and they notice.
Mm-hmm.
The 3 breath hug is a really popular one, which is as simple as teaching your loved one, your kid, to do a big bear hug, and then you coordinate the inhales and the exhales 3 times. And that's
Mm.
calming. It's connecting. Some people will say they do that when their kids get a little older, before they leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
I tell the story of my daughter. I taught that to her when she was 5, and I was again having another different mommy meltdown moment in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And she slid a note under the door that said, meet me in my room for a 3 breath hug. And
Oh.
yeah. And 10 years later, I was loaning out one of my mindfulness books to someone, and I found it in there, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I
That's
wanted
so
to post it
sweet.
on Instagram, and she was 15, and she was like, no, mom, that's so embarrassing. You can't do that.
Oh my
But
gosh. That's really sweet.
yeah.
All right, I have maybe a funny question for you.
Okay.
And if it's like totally off the wall, we can not include it. I've been thinking about this recently. I aired a show recently about how I've been sort of reevaluating my relationship with alcohol, particularly around motherhood, and I've had a lot of responses to it, and it's getting some traction and whatnot. And the part that I want to bring to you is, I think that I can imagine that some of these mindful breaks, like breath work, meditation, going for the walks, things like that, like I think that it's almost like there can be a little bit of a marketing problem with them. Like, and
Sure.
I'm equating it to what I'm talking about alcohol, because especially in motherhood, we see a lot of this narrative around, oh, your mommy juice, oh, take the edge off with alcohol. And alcohol can be seen as sort of the fun outlet,
Right.
right? So how do we like make some of this feel fun? How do we, like, I don't know, I just feel like sometimes I think my resistance to doing it is that they feel like a should do.
Mm,
They
right.
feel like a chore, whereas
Right.
alcohol never feels like a chore. It doesn't work as well, and it doesn't work
Right.
all the time, and I'm
Right.
very aware of that, but
Right. Right.
in that moment it's like
Yes.
it's almost like simplified down to, well, do I want fun or do I want good for me? and
Yeah.
and that I kind of hate that it's like that, but I don't know. Any thoughts on any thoughts on
Sure.
that?
Sure. So, one thought is that getting clear on your why
Mm,
for practicing a little bit of mindfulness, not because I'm telling you, not because you should, not because, um, Vogue magazine tells you you should, whatever. Um, but because you have to resonate with what that is doing for you. So for some people it is the telomeres, it's a long healthy life. For some people it's, I want to be more patient with my kid and not lose it, and it will do that over time. Some of it, it's, I want to just be more present. For me, I'm still am, this is my ongoing sort of challenge, is I can get so into my to-do list, and I love to get things done, and all of that kind of stuff. So I can miss out on all these beautiful ordinary moments with my kids or with anything in my life.
mhm,
So for me, that was a big draw of like, I'm here, I'm noticing these things, I'm not just checked out in my life. So um you have to get clear on why, like
mhm,
why. And then, you have to pick one, like I keep coming back, like pick one that is fun.
Yeah.
there, seriously,
That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't do the do the one that feels good, that feels fun. And I will say to people, have an attitude of amusement,
Mm,
especially when we're paying attention to our minds and our thoughts. It's like we can be so serious, like, how can I do this? Why am I like, ugh, versus
yeah.
like, wow, look at that. Look at, like, there I go again. Look at me. That's like a
Silly
hundred
me.
times today. Woo! I am
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So when you have that kind of amusing attitude with
Mhm.
ourselves and not taking ourselves so seriously, it
Mhm.
just lightens it, and experiment. So like if you try one and you're like, I hated that, that was awful. I mean, you might want to investigate maybe why, but also you don't have to do it again.
Right.
Why? This
Yeah.
is, you're not back in school. Like, I mean, you must sit here and do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. Like even earlier today, and not that the alternative was having a drink earlier today, because it was not, but I said to myself in between, the sitting in front of the Zooms, go outside and just get 20 minutes walk, blah, blah, blah. And I know absolutely I have enough experience doing that and talking myself into that to know I'm going to come back and feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes and maybe I just haven't found it yet, right? Like I know I feel better and I feel productive and I feel like good for you, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not fun.
No.
Like I don't know. I can't, I don't know that I can say it's fun. And maybe I just haven't found something that's super fun, but I
Well,
just,
and yeah, I guess it depends on your definition of super fun. So maybe you put some really great music on and you like, I don't know what super fun looks like for you. Or maybe you need
yeah,
to get roller skates. I mean, I don't know. Like seriously, make it crazy and fun. If that's what you're looking for, I'm kind of feeling like you need a little badass. We're not supposed to curse.
you can say badass, it's
Badass
fine.
adventure.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, um,
Yeah. 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 Yeah, you're right. Cause it's so funny. It's so funny how this always happens whenever I record like a day that I'm recording, like the conversations tend to intertwine. It's like part of the Enneagram thing for me is that I always have to make everything as productive and efficient as possible. So when I'm
mm,
walking, I'm also listening to a podcast that is
okay.
educational. And
Yeah.
I enjoy that because I'm like a self-development aholic right now,
Yeah.
but like it's not necessarily fun. It's interesting, but it's not fun. Or sometimes I'll even edit my own shows while I'm walking because it's like
Right.
must be productive. And it's like
Right.
it's not
So
really
what I'm hearing
fun.
from you, Christy,
Help
seriously,
me,
Christy,
Shonda.
no, is this idea of you're noted. I'm craving fun. Like you've said, like
I
I am
am.
craving fun. So that is your mind.
Yeah.
Like, how do you, that's, we talk about the breathe breaks, the becoming, like that's in there in becoming. It's like play is one of the breaks. And so it's like,
Mm,
we are adulting all the time. So your mindful break is like, how do I play? And how do I
yeah.
play in a couple of different ways? And it can be 5 minutes of play. 5 minutes of play feels pretty darn good. It can be putting on a crazy song and dancing and feeling like amazing doing that. Or like I said, get roller skates or do something you're like, oh God, I don't know. I have a friend who's now like, she and her husband now get up in the morning and do like ice baths. Like they do that
Mm,
like ice. And I'm like, well, no, thank you.
it's
But,
wild.
you know,
Yeah.
whatever. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Just experiment and yeah.
Yeah. And I think just tying it back for so many years, a night out was what fun was. And
Right.
now the whole point of me opening this conversation is a night out comes with consequences. A night
Yeah.
out comes with having to parent hungover, and there's nothing fun about that.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
the outlet that I've had for the last 10 years in that regard, the dancing, the drinking, the going out, the meeting friends, happy hour, that sort of thing is like, it's just not good. It's good
Right.
when I can do it. And that's the whole thing that I've been saying is like when I don't have any parenting responsibilities,
Yes.
sure. But that
Right.
happens about once a quarter. So,
Right.
it's like, yeah,
Right.
that's good though. That's interesting.
Yeah. And
That
and
is
and how can you
fun.
have that sort of fun with friends in a way? Maybe it's sober, maybe it's
Yeah.
not sober, maybe it's an earlier, whatever that is for you, that it's, I don't know, we're
Yeah.
gonna go together and try pole dancing or something. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know what that
Yeah. No,
is, but
something
it's
totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Something.
yeah. Yeah.
something. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Is there anything either about your book or about this conversation that you would have wanted to make sure to say or to talk about today that I didn't get to or didn't think to ask you about?
I think just clarifying, we talked about mindfulness, we talked about mindful breaks, and just to clarify what meditation is, because I think meditation and mindfulness can get interchanged and confused.
Okay.
So, meditation is carving out time in our day to practice the skill of mindfulness. And I'm a proponent of carving out that time 1 minute or 5 minutes every day. And that is ideally use a guided meditation to get started because somebody's voice will pull you back. But it's as simple as saying, I'm going to notice my inhale, I'm going to notice my exhale,
Mm.
inhale, exhale. And then we start to notice our mind wanders off on, again. But that is where the information comes in. It's information. It's also, we can recognize when restlessness or boredom or irritation shows up. And we say, oh, look at that. Isn't that interesting? It teaches us to have a little objectivity. We don't get automatically lost in all the thoughts that show up or all the emotions. And so it really is a skill. Like if I'm learning to swim, I can't just throw myself in the pool and then expect to do freestyle. I've got to practice every day.
Right.
And so doing that is really an important piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for that. And I want to share just with my listeners that, I'm example A of that. I don't have what I would call a strong meditation practice. And they've often heard me say that it's been like on my to-do list for 2 years of like being someone who meditates. And I was sharing earlier today with someone that it's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes is all it takes for me to either just, you might have just said this, so I might forgive me if I just like literally repeat what you say, but it's like, it's the 5 minutes of stillness to figure out what it is I actually need.
Yeah.
Like if I'm feeling like I need a nap, sometimes I'll just say, oh, do 5 minutes of a meditation. And by the end of it, I either go, yep, you need a nap, or no, I'm good,
Right,
or sometimes it's just enough time, enough of a pause to be like, oh, hey, you're feeling anxious today. Well, that's because you've only had coffee today and you
no
haven't had any
joke.
food.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
because we get involved and we forget and we're just, it's, and just to speak to this, the simplicity of it, I'm literally on YouTube just searching 5-minute meditation. Like it's not
Yeah.
fancy. And I think I had to get over that too. I had to move past it being this, I want to just say practice because it is, but it doesn't have to be formal. Like
Yes. Yes.
it's just YouTube if that's what you want it to be. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
Like,
exactly. And make it and set yourself up so it is so, so simple. Like, have that download on your phone or the app or whatever it is. So it's just like boom, I press a button and I have this guided voice and that's all it is. And you're allowed to like scratch the itch. People are like, can I move? Can I get like, yes, it's okay. The meditation police are not going to come with a stick and beat you. It's all right. So, really
yeah.
just this is for you. And again, having that sense of amusement and also recognizing there are going to be absolute moments where you're like, why am I doing this again? What am I? And I talk about that in the books is because that will surely come up. What am I doing for 5 whole minutes? I'm going to sit here and do nothing. Are you kidding me? What?
I know.
So yeah, and it's all fine. And just what we all really deserve and need to give ourselves permission to take just a few minutes. So we are again in the driver's seat of our lives, so we can kind of steer a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to. We
Yes.
need to. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, Shonda, thank you so much. I will link all of your, website and resources, and of course your book in the show notes for anyone who is interested in purchasing. Thank you again for your time. This was great.
Oh, thank you. And I wanted to mention too, the 7-minute daily, I'm offering a free mini meditation challenge. It's 7 days. It's free. If you go to my website and you can sign up and you will get a guided meditation with my voice and audio. So you can have that always. And then there's a PDF download that you can choose one of the mindful breaks. There are 3 types of mindful breaks you can choose and get started with that. So by all means, that's September 7th to the 13th. And, come join us.
Perfect. Yeah. That is for someone who doesn't want to work for it. literally. Just sign up.
That's right. Yeah.
Because I feel like that's part of the problem. That's like
Well,
ripping off the
yeah.
Band-Aid is sometimes we just need it handed to us,
Yes.
and then you see
Absolutely.
it, you get it, and you're like, oh, okay, I could do this,
Yes, exactly. Just test it out.
Yeah.
Give it a try.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Christy.
All right. You already know what I'm going to say, right? For me, this conversation was majorly impactful because I learned that I am missing a pretty crucial part of my toolbox: fun. And, to be clear, when I say fun, I do mean the playful, laughing, dancing, singing kind of fun. Do I think watching Housewives on my couch alone with a glass of wine is fun? I sure do. But is it playful? Is it joyful? I don't know. Do I know that I feel better after a walk? That at times it can feel amazing to just get in the sunlight and move my body? Yeah. But is it a laughing, stinking, good, fun time? Not really. Same with drinking water, reading the books. They're good for me. But are they fun? I don't know. Everything has this kind of serious vibe, this serious backdrop to it. It's like I'm either doing something in the toolbox to literally cope with a hard time, or I just know I'll feel better after, but going into it, I'm not looking forward to it. And as I'm writing this, I'm thinking, well, okay, so no one ever said that having water was supposed to be fun. You do just do that because it's good for you. So I don't know. I'm kind of struggling with what I'm saying a little bit. But what I know I'm not saying is that I'm not going to try to find a way to drink water that's more fun. But I do need to mix things up and add more of what is fun in. And I shared this conversation with Shonda, with my therapist, and she asked me, all right, so what's your plan? And so far, this is what I've got. I ordered 2 fiction books, a Colleen Hoover book and the Evelyn Hugo Seven Husbands book. And I would take the time to look up the actual titles, but I'm, once again, sending my editor this show at the very last minute. But if you are on social media, particularly on TikTok, you know exactly what I'm talking about. These books have been all the rage for the past, I don't know however long, but everyone is in love with them. And yeah, so I'm mixing in some fiction. And I have yet to actually try this, but I used to love curating playlists for my workouts. I used to run a ton, and I would make a new playlist like once a month that really was something I look forward to listening to. And now I hardly ever exercise without a podcast on. And it's great, but, it's not so fun. So I'm going to try that. And I also think I need to get back into some sort of class, even if it's just every now and then. But yoga used to be fun. That was fun. And a lot of what's fun is going to the place. Like, I've done yoga at home. I've done Peloton at home. I've done all of these things at home. But even as much as these programs try to make me feel like I'm part of the party, I'm still ultimately in my basement alone. And, I don't know. Going to those classes used to be fun. So the other thing that's coming to mind is that often over the last few months when I've thought about, hey, we got to socialize, whether there was alcohol involved or not, the planning of the socializing and making it happen has started to feel like something I, should do. It's like, I know I need to be social, even though I'm pretty happy to just like be home with my husband watching Netflix and whatever. But truly, when I think about it more as, oh, make a plan to have some fun, it immediately feels different. Does that make sense to anyone else? And the part where I need your help is that, I said it on the show. The way that I would socialize and have fun, for the most part, involved alcohol. And I would love to hear some of your ideas on how you socialize without alcohol. And I don't mean how you be in a bar and don't drink. I mean, what are some activities you wouldn't even think to add alcohol to that you're doing to socialize? And B, like, how can I have fun at 12 p.m. on a Tuesday too? You know what I mean? Like, where I'm not involving other people. Like, do you have fun at home in the middle of your day? Because I think I need to try to do that more. Oh boy. All right. So send me an email, send me a DM, text me. Like, I need some ideas here, peeps. All right. Anyway, thank you, Shonda, so much. Clearly, I got a lot out of this. Thank you for listening. Go check out Shonda's book, her meditation challenge. You're going to love it. And as always, I'll catch you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.